On June 22, 2025, the United States Air Force and Navy attacked three nuclear facilities in Iran as part of the Iran-Israel war. The Fordow Uranium Enrichment Plant, the Natanz Nuclear Facility, and the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center were targeted with 14 GBU-57A BMOP massive ordnance penetrator, 30,000-pound, 14,000 kilograms, bunker buster bombs carried by Northrop B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, and with Tomahawk missiles fired from a submarine. The attack, which was given the codename Operation Midnight Hammer, was the United States' first offensive action in the Iran-Israel war, which began on June 13th with surprise Israeli strikes. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the action via Truth Social, describing it as a very successful attack. Bomb damage assessment of the strikes is still ongoing, although early analysis suggests they did not achieve their stated goal. 15. Congressional Republicans largely supported Trump's action, while most Democrats and some Republicans were concerned about the constitutionality of the move, its effects, and Iran's response. World reaction was mixed, as some world leaders welcomed the move to incapacitate Iran's nuclear program, while others expressed concern over escalation or condemned the strikes. Iran responded by attacking a U.S. base in Qatar. The next day, Trump announced a ceasefire between Iran, Israel, and the U.S., ending the conflict. Let me give you a little background. Nuclear program of Iran-Israel war, Middle Eastern crisis, 2023 to present, and Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, Iran nuclear program, and American relations. 4 years after the U.S. and other Western nations helped engineer the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat against Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and the Eisenhower administration agreed to help develop the Iranian nuclear program, part of the general U.S. effort to promote the peaceful pursuit of nuclear science through the Atoms for Peace program. In 1968, Iran signed the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. With profits made from the 1973 oil crisis, Pahlavi decided to increase Iran's civil nuclear program and dispatched Iranian students to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to learn nuclear engineering. With U.S. endorsement, Pahlavi began a plan to build 23 nuclear power plants, which would enable Iran to supply electricity to neighboring countries, become a leader in the region, and become a modern state. When then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger attempted to limit Iran's ability to weaponize the nuclear reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel into fissile material through safeguards, Pahlavi handed nuclear construction contracts to Germany and France. In 2015, Iran, the United States under Barack Obama, and other countries negotiated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, to manage Iran's nuclear program to function at a limited level in return for removal of economic sanctions. In 2018, Trump, who has maintained since at least 2011 that Iran should not be permitted to acquire nuclear weapons, unilaterally broke the agreement by withdrawing the United States from the JCPOA, costing Iran the negotiated sanction relief, while implementing even more sanctions that effectively cut off JCPOA facilitated European trade with Iran. Trump's government said that the JCPOA was not preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. On February 4, 2025, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Washington, D.C., and reportedly reminded Trump that Iran had planned to assassinate him. Netanyahu gave a detailed slide deck presentation showing how Iran was increasing its uranium stockpile and advancing its centrifuge technology, which Netanyahu said showed Iran was getting closer to crossing the nuclear threshold. Trump wanted to attempt diplomacy, and his team decided on a 60-day outline to settle on an agreement. On May 31, 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, reported that Iran had sharply increased its stockpile of uranium, enriched to 60% purity, just below weapons grade, reaching over 408 kilograms, 899 pounds, a nearly 50% rise since February. The agency warned that this amount is enough for multiple nuclear weapons if further enriched. The IAEA reported that Iran was not meeting its obligations per its 2019 agreement by hiding its development of nuclear material, and the IAEA voted to censure Iran on June 12. Iran responded to the IAEA censure by increasing its uranium enrichment to levels beyond what is required for civilian use, while consistently claiming that it is developing nuclear energy and not nuclear weapons. One of the major Iranian nuclear sites is Fordow Uranium Enrichment Plant, estimated to be 80 to 90 meters underground. Because of its deep location, the United States military officials had proposed the use of GBU-57 ABMOP bunker buster bombs, which can only be carried by a B-2 bomber, to destroy Fordow. The United States is the only nation to possess either of these capabilities. There was extended debate about whether the bunker buster bombs would actually be able to destroy Fordow. 2425. Multiple advisors to Trump, including Steve Bannon and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, warned against war with Iran and have claimed the intelligence community does not consider Iran to be building a nuclear weapon. 26. After Trump called Gabbard wrong and said he did not care what she said, Gabbard changed her position and said Iran could have a nuclear weapon within months. 27. Trump also said in response to these comments that, "My intelligence community is wrong." 28. Israeli involvement. Israel, which has never signed the NPT but is widely believed to possess nuclear weapons, has consistently viewed the potential for regional powers to acquire nuclear weapons as an existential threat. It has repeatedly undertaken both covert and overt actions to prevent such developments, and has likely been involved in the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists. The conflict between Iran and Israel has been intensifying since the October 7, 2023, attacks by Hamas, as Hamas is partially funded by Iran. Historically, the U.S. has supported Israel in the Middle East, and particularly has financed Israel's military through United States foreign military financing, as well as supporting Israel's military actions. Vox said that Israel's goal seems to be a regime change in Iran, rather than a simple targeting of their nuclear program, and that Trump has placed military support behind these goals. Israeli involvement. Congressional resolutions. In the week before the bombings, Senator Tim Kaine, Virginia, introduced a resolution in the Senate stating that Trump could not use the U.S. military against Iran without explicit authorization from Congress, through either a declaration of war or an authorization for use of military force. Representatives Thomas Massie, RKY, and Ro Khanna, DCA, introduced a parallel resolution, the War Powers Resolution, in the House of Representatives. The House resolution had several dozen Democratic co-sponsors. Congressional resolutions. In the week before the bombings, Senator Tim Kaine, Virginia, introduced a resolution in the Senate stating that Trump could not use the U.S. military against Iran without explicit authorization from Congress, through either a declaration of war or an authorization for use of military force. Representatives Thomas Massie, RKY, and Ro Khanna, DCA, introduced a parallel resolution, the War Powers Resolution, in the House of Representatives. The House resolution had several dozen Democratic co-sponsors. Opinion polling. Many right-wing politicians and commentators in the United States, including Rand Paul and Tucker Carlson, have criticized Trump's support for Israeli strikes against Iran and the possible involvement of the United States in the war. A June 2025 poll of Trump voters found 53% said the U.S. should not get involved in the Iran-Israel conflict. A separate June 2025 poll by The Washington Post found 45% of respondents opposed the U.S. military launching airstrikes against Iran, and a further 30% were unsure. 25% supported a military response. In the weeks leading up to June 22nd, the U.S. evacuated its citizens, issued travel warnings, and withdrew non-essential personnel from its embassies. On June 16th, it was reported that the U.S. was moving forces east over the Atlantic Ocean, including at least 31 air tankers to Europe, an unusually large number. Also on June 16th, Iranian facilities interfered with the ship position reporting, causing a nuisance to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. On June 16th and 17th, Trump made several posts hinting at something much bigger than a peace deal coming. On June 17th, Trump called on Iran to unconditionally surrender. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told U.S. allies over recent days that Washington would prefer to see a diplomatic solution, and Trump had sent U.S. officials to Tehran in support of a nuclear deal. On June 19th, Trump issued a statement via White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, saying, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." According to sources on the same day, Israeli officials, including Netanyahu, Israel Katz, and Eyal Zamir, called the Trump administration, saying that they could not wait 2 weeks. They thought they only had a small opportunity window. The phone call also included J.D. Vance, who pushed back against the Israelis, citing concerns about direct U.S. involvement and being pulled into war. Pete Hegseth was also on the call. According to the Jerusalem Post, it took Netanyahu and Ron Dermer a week to convince Trump to bomb Iran, with Trump and Netanyahu speaking almost daily. According to the sources, Trump and senior U.S. officials had been impressed by Israel's achievements. Trump had only planned to bomb Fordow, but Netanyahu and Dermer convinced him to attack the other sites as well. In the days before the attack, Iran increased its oil exports, fearing a U.S. attack on its oil facilities. Iran claimed that nuclear material had already been evacuated from Fordow and Natanz and moved elsewhere. On June 21st, the United States deployed B-2 stealth bombers to Guam. U.S. bases in the Middle East entered a state of highest alert and improved air defense as Iran threatened to strike any country assisting Israel. Most of the U.S. military aircraft parked on the tarmac at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar were no longer visible by June 19th, suggesting they might have been evacuated in case of Iranian retaliation. The Houthis also declared their readiness to fight. In response, the United States warned of a devastating retaliation should American interests be threatened.